Hey, everybody. On this episode of SoundBITES, we have a really great guest, Kevin Dean. He's CEO and founder of ManoByte, a technology services company specializing in AI driven business transformations. Kevin has a background and passions in data science, change management, ocean conservation, and we even share some of the same stomping grounds from West Michigan. So we'll have a conversation about that. But ManoBytes works with some really great, interesting brands, and we're excited to hear from it. So, Kevin, tell us about the background, man. Like, what got you from the start all the way up to forming your company?
Yeah, glad to kind of talk about that. I started out like Alice. It's an interesting story. Right out of school, I have a degree in computer information science. All right, and at the time, a lot of the things that we were talking about were really theoretical. Right, like
Hmm.
this is a possibility, but they really couldn't get done. And so out of school, and I started working for. I worked for two Fortune 500 companies, and that gave me a lot of experience, a lot of learning, but it really wasn't my passion because I really wanted to be able to help businesses solve problems and not get stuck in what at times could be seen as corporate red tape.
Yeah.
And there was just a lot of things going on. So one day when I was out doing some diving in Hawaii, that's where my mom used to live.
Oh,
I
wow.
said, you know what? I'm going to go out and do my own thing. So I said, that's it. I left a big, great job at a Fortune 500 company and started my own gig. So here we are.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think when you were at CIS, or you were in CIS as a background, which at the time, like, some company or universities had that as part of the business school and some had it part of the engineering school, but it was that really nice blend of, like, you got a lot of business classes out of it and then really how you could apply some of that theory. So when you were coming out of school, what were the most important or interesting elements of that curriculum that you're applying today?
Yeah. I take a lot of learning from the things I learned in school. And it's funny because a lot of what I learned way back in the day is really coming to life now. So we had a huge emphasis on um, data, business intelligence, information, and even at the time, artificial intelligence, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, those were, I mean, it wasn't to the level of what we have today, but those were common concepts that we were talking about and that we were learning in school, right? We didn't have the hardware, the software to do the things that we're doing now, which is what is super exciting for me. Like, I get to go way back to all the theoretical stuff that we learned about in school, and now we're seeing it in true application. And so that's exciting. And what's also cool about it for me is that like people think, oh, this AI stuff is so new. It's like I'm old and I learned this stuff in school, man.
It, like, the 60s, like, that's when it was first
I'm not that old.
conceptualized.
I'm not
No, I
that
know, but like back, I think like at Dartmouth, they were talking about these concepts in the 60s and like theoretical, this is what it's going to be. And you
old.
mentioned, when I got out of school, the cutting edge of AI was optical character recognition. Nobody even thinks about it as AI now, but before you had people reading envelopes by hand and placing it where it needed to go. Now computers just do all that, and like, that's magic that people don't realize is an application that gets used every single day.
Yeah. And so, out of school, crazily and fortunately enough, I started right out of school dabbling in data intelligence, business intelligence, AI, all that type of stuff right out of school. So some cool things that we did right out of school. Worked for one company where we put together a solution that would automatically go through and pull all their customer data, sort it out, and determine what the customer should be purchasing yet. Long before we have all the personalization and recommendation engines that we have now. One of the things that we did, next company that I went to, we did some really cool stuff with automating business processes for engineering. I worked for a
Hmm.
very large, well-known engineering company, um, and we were doing, PLM, project lifecycle management software solutions that would, completely automate their entire business cycle across the globe. And then, one of the cool things I did right before I started my own gig was we were doing some biometric stuff where we would for healthcare use biometrics to identify who are you, like, and can you really access this information? And then it would track like what you were accessing, when you were accessing, and
Huh.
then calculate how much you owed, how much we could build for that type of stuff. So that's stuff that I was doing like right out of school. Right, it's cool stuff, fun stuff.
That's pretty rad. Like being able to take something you learned and then being able to apply it is really exciting because like when I was leaving school, I tell a story a lot, but I thought, I'm going to work on race cars. Eventually I did, but I thought I was going to work on race cars. I have an electrical engineering degree, a computer science degree. I'm going after this. I'm going to be doing that. And then I got my first job in the automotive world. And my first project was determining if a bolt contained hexavalent chromium. It's not
Hmm.
super fun. Like that was my first, Instagram versus reality moment, I suppose, of things are a little bit different than what you think when you leave school.
Yeah. So you
But
were in metrology, right? Wasn't
what's
that
that?
metrology? Isn't that where they like look at the metal and figure out like what's in each of the pieces?
So for my first job, effectively, yeah, like I was doing
Okay.
that kind of stuff. I was doing material science, but my background is like double E. It's computer science, but you're taking all the data to determine, you know, all these millions of bolts that are coming off. California just banned hexavalent chromium, which is amazing material for stopping corrosion. It's also an amazing material for giving you unbelievable amounts of cancer. So it's something that you really don't want.
Ah, yeah.
but
Well, we're
but yeah, it
glad
was
you're solving that problem for us.
yeah. I mean,
Thanks,
when you look
Derek.
back at it, it's fun, right? It's like, oh, that's interesting. When you're there, and it's like, you think I'm going to be working on race cars. I'm going to work on the new Mustang platform, and you get assigned the hexavalent chromium bolt problem.
I was going to
Oh,
say, Kevin, similarly, like you were working for Fortune 500 companies. That's where everybody thinks they want to work, right? But you said you were frustrated by that corporate red tape. You just wanted to be a problem solver. So you're in, I think, Hawaii, you said, on a trip,
yep.
and you're like, I'm going to start my own thing. What was that next step, and how much did to Derek's point, like Instagram versus reality, like what you thought starting a business would be like, and then the reality of starting a business.
Yeah, there's a whole lot of memes about what it's like to think it's going to be starting a business versus what it actually is.
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, look, I'm a pretty smart guy. Uh, and I've made some cash, working for this company. We've got a bunch of savings. I'm going to go out and just do my own thing, bringing out these new solutions that I know everybody wants and everybody needs. Um, and just so that we're like a time frame, like I started the company in 2008.
Mm.
And for people who don't
Right
know,
before the
That's a
2009
implosion.
wild ride. Yeah.
2009 was the recession. And so here we are, like, oh, like, yeah, we ate through a lot of savings really quick, and we ate through 401k, and we got down to absolutely, you know, like real talk here. Like we got down to the point of like, oh, we're gonna lose our house because
Mm.
that's what the reality is, right? There's this whole thing of, how do you, get a project, have enough cash because, at the time, it was just a solopreneur type deal guy. I got this project. Now I'm doing all this work. Then now I'm doing all the work. The money's slowly going away. And so now I had to figure out like, how do you have sustainable revenue that generates while you're doing the whole life cycle that a business needs for selling, maintaining, onboarding, offboarding, all those things. There's a lot for people to think about. And so a lot of people even feel like, oh, I'm just going to go and start my agency because I know this. And oh, it looks so easy. And this is so great. And I'm just going to go out and be successful. And it's not that easy. It takes a lot of grit, determination, resilience in order to make it work. And the thing about it is, there's an interesting statistic that I used to keep with me. First, it was most businesses fail within the first 2 years, right? Most companies, most small businesses fail within the first 2 years. And so that was my thing. It's like, I'm not going to fail within the first 2 years, right? Then it was like, okay, most businesses fail, in the next 5 years. So I said, I'm not going to fail in the first 5 years. And then there's a statistic about, the amount of revenue that a company has to make, right, in order for them to continue to thrive, right? It was like first, it was like, oh, first I'm going to get to this first 100,000, then I'm going to get to 500,000, right? You got to figure out these different levels in order to like stay healthy and thrive. And it's like I was always determined, like I got to get to this next point, and it was just resilience, right, that
Mhm.
got you through, right? Resilience, and then understanding the customer and what the needs are, right? Those things are important too, but either way, like you always have to be resilient.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of dark days that people aren't necessarily expecting, right? Like they think it's like, oh man, it's private jets and you work for yourself and it's amazing. And it's like you might not be sleeping. Like it's pretty tough for it sometimes. But yeah, it's I think some people it's that you can't think of a better way to live though.
Yeah, I think like you have to be a certain type of human, right, in order to be able to really make it work. And there are lots of differences between somebody who's really just a freelance worker, right? Really, you're just an employee that is on I-9 versus someone
Mhm.
who's you got a little small little boutique versus trying to scale a business. There's different levels, and there's also the type of business owner who's really just in it to sell, which that's a business model in and of itself that a lot of tech companies really are following. They're really just in it to get their rounds of funding, and then knowing that investors know that only 1% of companies are really going to make it and the rest are going to fail, right? That's a business model in and of itself, right? And so you have to know going in, what do you want to be, what's your path, and then you've got to use the right playbook in order to meet those objectives, because each one is a different road. Not
Let's talk
necessarily
about
none
that.
of them are wrong within themselves, but it's a different road.
Go
No,
ahead,
go
Laura.
ahead,
Sorry.
Derek.
Oh, so we'll talk about that playbook. So when you started the company, right before an impending implosion in the economy, when that started happening, what were you doing to get your first clients? What did you think your playbook was? And then how did it shift over time?
Yeah, that is absolutely funny. So I think all of this really ties back to the name of our company, which is ManoByte. So Mano is a Hawaiian word for shark, right? So
Mm,
shark bite, right? So but in the name, obviously everyone, if you see the name, you know that the end BYTE is a reference to technology. But the Mano part, we used it as a double entendre. Not only was it focusing on the shark, but at the time, it meant marketing, analytics, networking online. So we were
mm,
really started out as and this is kind of where we have a little bit of a connection, Derek. We were really a social media company that was helping businesses leverage, like, how do I look at the metrics that are coming in for my company to understand
Mm.
who I need to be targeting, how I need to be targeting them. So that was kind of some of the things that we were doing really early on. We were focusing in on helping people understand, how to leverage social media the best way. Uh, and it's funny because in 2009, um, I went. I was focusing in first on local businesses in the area, go to a lot of chamber of commerce meetings, networking locally. Worked with the the Small Business Association,
mm.
SBA. So worked with those types of organizations locally. Went to I'm not going to name the name, but if you know where I'm live, then it's not going to be too hard to figure it out. But I went to a large organization that owned a lot of things in the city that I lived in, and went into them and said, "Hey, you know what? You need to be doing this thing." This is a true story. I went into uh, the general manager of this one of their own locations and said, "Hey, you know what? You need to be doing Twitter." They're like,
Mm.
"Twitter? What's this Twitter thing? You're stupid. Get out of here. How do you come to me with this stuff? This is crazy." Like, and I was literally like giving them the playbook that they would later on use. But it was one of these things that they couldn't see it because it was
Yeah.
too early. And so I think that's a lesson learned for me, is that sometimes you can have the right answer and people not be ready for it. And that can have a negative impact on your business model as well. So, Yeah.
That's interesting. And to that reference, we were noticing, or you and I were chatting about how we were probably in the same room at the same time and didn't realize it, 10 years ago, gosh, almost 20 years ago now, which is crazy to think about, because we were at the same like tweet ups, we were calling them, and we
Yep.
had the same group of people going to those meetings, the early group of Twitter people that were, because at the time there were only a handful of people on Twitter, period, let
Nope.
alone people in your city. So we just all meet up as a group and hang out and get beers and stuff like that. So that's kind of, it's fun to think about how far that world's come, because at the time you had like Gary Vaynerchuk was saying like, hey, this is going to be huge, this is going to change the
Yep.
world, and then other people just weren't there yet. And Lauren and I talk about this from time to time, like we get into the world now, we create awareness versus trying to push a solution. We'll create awareness of a solution, but when people aren't ready to hear it, they're not ready to hear it yet. So you just create awareness, plant the seed, and move on to another day. um,
Yeah. For
so
sure. For sure. And it's not always, and being first isn't always, the best, right?
Hmm.
It's like if you're the first person in a, battalion, the first soldier out, he's getting like, he's out, right? It's the ones who the back of the line are going to make it through, right?
I have a question about, you talked about starting your business. You said in 2008, there were times like where you're like, do we have to put the house up? Like, what do we have to do here to make this work? What made you want to keep going instead of maybe going back to a Fortune 500 job, or maybe a more secure job, as they would say?
Yeah. Um, I think there's a lot of things that I thought about at the time as to, um, that were not financially driven, right? So,
Mm,
like, if you're financially driven, and not that and we all need money, we all want money, and money allows for us to do lots of other things that we want to do in life. But if that's your driver, then you're going to make completely different decisions, right? And money wasn't my driver. It's still not my driver, right? It's the passion for helping people solve problems and getting them great solutions, right? That's the thing that drives me. It's like, the money will come, right? At least you always like have that, like, and the money has come, right? But money comes and goes, right? And that's the thing to remember too, is like, if you're just in it for the money, like when you're having those low days, you're going to like your self-worth, everything that you think about is going to like be be very challenged. But if that's not your driver, if you're driven by, I want to solve these problems for these group of people, and I'm driven on figuring out like what's on the other side of this, like you'll keep going and you'll get through it, and the money will come back again, right? It's just
hmm.
the way that it goes.
I'm curious how important your support system was during that
Oh my
time.
goodness.
Can you talk
Yeah.
a little bit about that?
Yeah. So it's very interesting. Like, I've been married for 24 years. I mean, I think that's all that I have to say.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
it's like, you know, um, my wife, she's awesome. She's like, we'll just figure it out, right? This is what we're
Hmm.
going to do as a team, right? We're just going to, and and the thing about it is, like, we're going down this interesting path, and that's okay. We can go there. Most relationships, the number one reason most relationships break up is because of finances, right? Right. And so for me, like, it's never been about the money, right? It's about, like, and for my wife, it's not about the money either. Like, we want to have experiences, right? And so, like, as long as we can have a great experience, then that's what it's all about. And experiences come in lots of different forms, right?
Hmm.
And so, starting a company and having hard times, that's an experience, right?
Hmm.
And I think that you have to understand, like, you know, we currently live in Tampa, Florida, just got hit by a hurricane, and people are saying, "Oh my goodness, what am I going to do? What about my house? What about the stuff? What's going to happen?" And people are depressed, and people are crying, and the world's like, it's bad,
Yeah.
and Tampa right now is still bad. But what we did is say, "Hey, you know what? we've got our family. Let's grab a couple of things. Let's go on hurrication. Right? So we're calling it a hurrication. Like we're gonna go out and have an experience, right? The house is like, oh, we have insurance. You know, if the house is gone, just get another house, right? As long as we got, as long as we've got each other, and we just go have an experience. So we've been to, so we left Tampa, went up to Nashville, Tennessee, played around there for a little bit, went to Chicago, played around there for a little bit. Now we're in DC, gonna play around here for a little bit. Gonna go over to New York next and play around there,
Hmm.
and then once things are settled back in Tampa, we'll go back. So the point of the story is it's all about the experience, right?
Mm,
It's just like, and that's my support system. It's like we're like, hey, it's just an experience, right?
mm,
And life for everybody has to realize that everybody knows this, but I think it's hard for people to think this way. Life will always have ups and downs, highs and lows. Everybody who is living, like, you can look at Instagram and see, like, oh, it looks like their life is so great and grand and rosy. That's the snapshot that they took,
mhm.
right? And after they took that snapshot, they went back and cried in their beer glass, right? I mean, so like if you understand that everybody has ups and downs, everybody has highs and lows, and as long as you have a group of people around you, not just your family. So now we've got a company of people, and the people who are with us in our organization are people who really understand that even in our company, we're going to have good days, we're going to have bad days, we're going to have good months, bad months. There's going to be ups and downs because that's the nature of business, right? No company is always up and to the right. No company ever
Right.
is, right? People come and go, people, all sorts of things happen. But if you have a support system within your company or with even on your team that say, hey, let's work through this together, then you're gonna always come out on top.
I think that's a healthy approach to take, that even the negative things or the perceived negative things are really an adventure, and then you get to decide how you navigate through that adventure. I think there's probably a lot of probably a book on leadership based on that concept alone that you could probably put together, which is really healthy. And that brings us, well, not to go too far back to the beginning, but you started your business as a social media company at the forefront of social media, and then you're trained classically in data. So it makes sense that these things start to come together. But at what point did you start shifting or transitioning the business from being social media management, let's tell people about why you want to use Twitter, to, hey, let's start delivering AI experiences, let's start delivering data analytics? How did that transition happen?
Yeah. Again, I think it was something natural, and I think it was something that was really tied around helping to solve business problems. So, what we saw really quickly from a social media problem is that social media wasn't a silver bullet, right?
Hmm.
Uh, the problem with social media was that, yeah, you had to make sure that it was tied to, am I going to get a customer from this, right? And from this customer, am I going to keep this customer? And then what's the lifetime value of the customer? Things that just saying, oh, we posted something at the time on Twitter. Oh, great, yippee! Right? No, it's not that. It's not that. It has
10
to be
likes.
right. What's next, right? And how does this tie to the value of the company? And so we began to look for ways to solve for the complete picture and really make that total connection on how do you really make this all work together. So at the time, we said, okay, um, if we're going to post something on Twitter, then it needs to be tied to a blog. And so if we're going to tie it to a blog, then we've got to update people through email. And so we started like pulling all these other pieces together, and that led us to, well, we've got these five different pieces of software. Now we've got a mess. And so that led us to say, you know what? HubSpot at the time pulled all these things together. So we became a
Hmm.
HubSpot partner back in 2012. No,
Hmm.
2014. So in
Okay.
2014, we became a HubSpot partner, right before about a year before they went public. So actually, that was been 2013. So we became a HubSpot partner because HubSpot provided a solution that would allow companies to connect all the dots together, right? It allowed you to tie together your social media marketing, your blogging, your email marketing, and it tied it to a customer, where now, since I'm tied to a customer, I can tie this to revenue, right? And so that kind of drove us. And then over our evolution with HubSpot, we're like, okay, great. Now we're using HubSpot. We became a HubSpot partner. We are currently still an elite HubSpot partner. Um, we started building workflows for people, and these workflows were great inside of HubSpot, but then they extended outside of HubSpot. So now it's like, oh, I can't just have my CRM. I got to connect to my ERP. I've got to
Yeah.
connect to my financial system. I got to connect to my HRIS, right? And so now we started connecting all these systems together to companies to solve for a problem. And then once we started connecting all these systems together, we're like, oh, now we have to collect all this data in one spot.
Yeah.
And so that led us to that data intelligence BI piece. And then it's like, oh, you know what? Now that we've got all this data, how do we help people understand and make sense out of it? Because they don't know how to do that. And that led us
Yeah.
to artificial intelligence to pull it all together. So in a nutshell, it was this natural evolution as tools and technologies came to continue to solve for the business problems that people were identifying. And the problems just got bigger. And as those problems got bigger, we look for ways to pull that together and keep them connected and solve for them.
Yes, you did a really nice job of continuing to build the right pieces of the airplane that you needed for that piece of the flight. And like now you're to the point where you're putting landing gear on it and getting getting for that stage. But it's
Yeah,
really interesting.
I think we're at the point where like now we're to the stage where okay, we built the airplane. Now we're getting ready to land and like okay, let's build the hotel and let's build the swimming pools and like put all that stuff around it, right?
Yeah, I like that. And I think the adapt back to again back to the beginning again, like the adaptability, the grit piece, like continued to see the new opportunities, adapted the business, grew a little bit, adapted the business, grew a little bit. And along that way, you probably saw a bunch of ups, downs, bumps. What were the interesting challenges or notable challenges along the way that you had to solve as you grew as a leader?
Yeah. So I would say the number one challenge that I think you'll always solve for are people, right? It's always like it's never the technology. It's never the technology. It's always the people. And when I say people, I mean like when you are working with your customer, they're people, right? And people are adverse to change, right? And so
Mm,
if you're helping to roll out a new system, you have to deal with the people element of that, which is change management, risk management, right? We have customers who they know their system is broken, but because they've had it for so long, they don't want to move or change. And sometimes they'll even self sabotage just so they don't have to move to another system, right? So that's a people issue, never a technology issue. You know, we have people internally, right? And so you've got to like rely on people, and people come and go, right? We're fortunate that we've got an average tenure I think of about 7 years, right?
wow.
So I mean, we have a lot of tenured people, but just like everybody else, the average tenure of an employee is 18 months, right? That's the
Wow.
that's across the board, 18 months. So we have people who come and go in 18 months. You could be in the middle of a project and now this person is off to the next gig and now the customer's like, oh, and you can get caught up thinking, what's wrong with my company or right. And it's like nothing's wrong. This is just a natural cycle, right? It's always the people issue that you have to solve for, right? Every single time it's people.
I think that's a really interesting point in having an engineering background. It's something I learned too late, like significantly. Even when I was in corporate America, we were rewarded for being good problem solvers, but I always undervalued the people problem. And when you're in the consulting space or you're in the services space, like you are and we are, when you're in a room with a client and you find something that's incorrect with their business or need to fix it, somebody in that room might have made the decision that you're now about to shit all over. And so like you need to think of a way to deliver that message in a way that's people friendly so it doesn't get sabotaged, so that you can get an ally on the team and get the result without making somebody feel like they made a poor choice, because they probably made a great choice when they made it, which again something I learned too late in life, but I'm working on now. Like the communication things are really really key.
Yeah, it really is. And I think that even when you know it, it's still hard, right?
Yeah.
Right, because I'm a people too, right? I'm a people too, and I have my good days, my bad days, and as people, we may tend to, have personalities that go well with this customer or this employee, and others maybe not so much. And it's those ones that are the not so much that you still have to care for and nurture just as much as the ones that you're more naturally inclined to. And that can be a challenge. And so those are just things that you have to continually work on, especially as a leader. Like you've gotta you've gotta acknowledge that you have those personal biases and those leanings, and you have to realize, like, I've got this is like my strength, this is my weakness, and I know it. And then you've got to decide how you're going to address them, right?
Do you think most leaders are that like self-aware of their
Oh,
own?
heck no. Most people aren't that self-aware.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you get there?
Like, in order to get there, you have to want to get there, right? that's
Mm,
that's the thing. Like, I think it goes back to what I was saying about, you've got to pick a path.
mhm,
Right? What path are you going to go down? Right? That's why you've got most people who will never go out and start their own company. It's not their path, right? You've
Mhm.
got most people who would never choose for themselves to be in a leadership role, but they just feel like, oh, like if I don't take this, right? Because, and I'm literally saying, like, if I don't take this, because they feel like, hey, I'm comfortable at my position now, but they're telling me that I'm up for leadership, and if I don't take that, then what does that mean for me? And it
mm,
always comes back to what I said earlier, like, generally financially driven. Like, oh, does that mean that I'm never going to get anything else if I don't take this? And
Yeah.
so, like, you've got to pick your path, right? I think it's hard. Most people will never get there, and that's probably okay. But if you want to go there, then you've got to literally say, like, I'm going to go there. It's going to
mm.
be tough, but I'm going to go there.
When you're looking at, like, speaking of continuing on the path, this is more future looking now. When you're looking at a new market or new clients or a new service you want to offer, how do you selectively do that? And then back to the people problem, how do you make sure your team is on board to be able to deliver that effectively?
Yeah. Um, I think there's lots of ways that you do it, right? But I think if you're going to be successful, it's like the hedgehog principle, right? What am I passionate about? What does the market need? And
Mhm.
what can we deliver at an economic value? Right? You've
Yeah.
got to pick those three things, right? Um, and as a leader, you've got to be able to see, oh, social media is going to be great, even if nobody believes that it's going to be,
Yeah.
right?
Like,
And
that's where the puck's going to be. I need to skate there. Yeah.
yeah, that you got to skate to where the puck is going to be, but at the same time, you can't skate there too soon, right? Like, that's where the puck is going to be. You just can't skate there yet, right? Because now you're like calling out, like, everybody's, oh, that's where the puck is going to be, right? So
Yeah, or you're just there lonely by yourself waiting and you don't get the result. Like, being too early is, that's one thing that I had learned too. Like, being too early is the same as being wrong,
yep.
on some levels, which is kind of weird. So what's the future of ManoByte? What direction are you continuing to go in? You're moving toward generative AI and deploying some of these new tools. Like, these are tools that are 18 months old effectively, and your team's already embracing them and deploying them. So what is this looking like going forward?
Yeah, so I think that's a nice, good question, and I think that I want to come back, and I'll circle back to that, but I want to talk about the people piece.
Yeah.
um, it's You have to have a core team that's going to follow you into the battle, right? Like, you got to have a core set of people who will follow you wherever you go, right? Okay, great. Now that you've got that core team that's going to follow you wherever you go, you've got to be good with letting some people you know, go their own way, and then finding the next group of people who are going to be on this leg of the journey with you, right? And so the future for ManoByte um, is exciting, right? It really is, because I know you're saying like 18 months, Gen AI, like this is like not the first inning. This is like the first couple of swings, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's just so much that is to come, right? And and it's not because it's new, because like I said, like, I learned this stuff in school, a lot of this stuff. But what's new is that the the speed at which now we can deliver solutions. What's new is the democratization of these tools being accessible to everybody, right? And what's new is that you combine this with so many other things that we have today, and we're literally looking at a brand new playing field that is being drawn right now.
Yeah.
And so I think what's exciting for me at ManoByte in the future is that we are at the forefront of this journey. And because we're at the forefront of this journey, then that really means for us, if we play our cards right, we get to come out um, as leaders, right, in a brand new space that, you know, candidly and truthfully, right, there's so few people who know how to truly leverage generative AI and AI for business value, not
Yeah.
just for writing my term paper or writing this last tweet, right? But how do you use it to drive business value and to innovate? Like, we know how to do that. And I think that because we know how to do that, and we know how to go along the journey and create experiences for people, there's going to be a lot of cool things for us ahead. The
Yeah.
playing field is still not drawn yet, so that's cool and exciting to me.
Yeah. I think it's I think people think that the generative AI large language model piece of AI is a big deal, and I think they're still underestimating it. Like people think it's like, oh, it's going to be game changing. This is going to change how everything works, and I think they're still underestimating that. And Lauren and I talk about this quite a bit too when we're building tools for people. We're like, this is the worst it's ever going to be right here today. Like this is like literally the worst it's ever going to be, and it's pretty good. And it's something fascinating to look at. And like the people that are deploying it now and executing good solutions now are really going to be reaping the rewards. Come, you know, especially like to your point, using it for a term paper, fine. Using it to help like do some uh, posts on Twitter, fine. Using it for real business value that saves money or really drives growth, that's where it's going to get interesting. And I think we're right to the point where those use cases are developing, and it looks like what y'all are doing is going to be right there. It's going to be exciting.
Yeah, it is exciting.
Let's shift gears a little bit and talk ocean conservation. So this is a curveball. This is something we've never talked about before on the podcast, but this is something you're passionate about. Like, what got you into that? What part of your history and soul brings that into the equation?
Yeah, I've always been a water baby, right? So um, I started, I started, I started diving or scuba diving when I was, well, how I actually got started, it was pretty unconventional. I worked at a swimming pool when I was like 14 years old,
Okay.
and I couldn't be a lifeguard. I wanted to be a lifeguard. That's all I wanted to do. Is I wanted to be a lifeguard. I couldn't be a lifeguard. But what they would let me do is they would let me come in and clean the deep end of the pool. And so they put me in scuba gear, right? They taught me how to. That's how I learned how to scuba. Like they put me in scuba gear, and I would go down with a brush, like a steel brush, and like scrub the moss off of the concrete pool. And I would just stay down there for a couple hours. Like this, it was like awesome. Just like, oh man, this is great. And then that was my job for the day. And then I got to hang out at the pool all day, right? And
Okay.
look at the girls. So that was like fun, right? So, that was my job. And so, like, I just was always in the water. And then as I got older, I had more experiences, we're able to take that scuba experience out, to the oceans and to the waters and to the seas, and you began to see like how amazing um, ocean life is, and how untouched a lot of it is, and how undiscovered a lot of it is, and
Yeah.
it's a world of its own that a
Mm.
lot of people have never been able to see, and we want to keep that world, right? And we want to be able to explore that and share that exploration with people. So that's how it kind of got started.
It's weird to think that we know more about and we've explored more of Mars than we have of the Pacific Ocean.
And that's crazy, right? It's
Yeah.
absolutely crazy.
Why is that? Why do we think that is? Is it not as
There's no money.
exciting or
There's
sexy?
no
No
there's,
money.
there's no money to be made
Hmm.
in the ocean.
Hmm.
The money's There's lots to be made
In
up
the
there.
sky. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
There's still there's so much value from it, to your point, just not monetary.
yeah.
So
It's all about the experience.
yeah.
It's a beautiful world, right? Underneath the sea, underneath the oceans, right? Yeah, just amazing life to be explored, and yeah, that's it's awesome.
Is that why you gravitated towards Florida where you live now?
Yeah, so that I
Close to
could
the
be on
water?
the water as many times as I want. So yeah, we
It's
love
nice to have that
love to be on the
proximity.
water. Yeah, love it.
Well, that's awesome. So we usually end our podcast with two questions, and these are my favorite. This is my favorite part of the pod. So the first question we like to ask is, if you could have dinner with the either 18 or 25-year-old version of yourself, what advice would you give, knowing what you know now and all that you've been through?
Ah, that's a great question. So, um, I would give my 18 to 25-year-old self the advice to be more fiscally responsible.
Mm.
And that's what I would tell myself. It's like, yeah, you want to have experiences, but in order to have experiences, so this may sound a little contrary to what I was been talking about, like, but it's not right. If you're more fiscally responsible, you can have more experiences and better experiences. So just don't blow it all on shoes, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
There's some freedom in being fiscally responsible that a lot of people don't think. It's, they usually think like, oh, like I can't do this, this, and this, but it actually gives you the freedom to do more than you want, more than you could imagine. But I love that answer. That's actually we usually get a new answer every time, and this one did not disappoint.
Yeah.
Hey.
Yeah. It's we have some themes been forming, but we've never had the same answer twice. We've been doing this for 3 years now.
Oh, I love that. I'm glad I didn't disappoint.
Yeah.
No, it's been perfect. And then the last question we like to ask is, what books are you listening to, or podcasts, or what's in your AirPods as you're traveling across the country?
Yeah. So I I cannot remember the exact title of the book, but this is kind of the genre that I'm looking at the picture, and I can tell you all about it, and I'll come back with the title. Maybe you guys can throw it in the
Yeah, we'll
feed.
link it in the
Yeah.
notes.
Yeah, link it in the notes. But I'm reading this fascinating book about how people develop inherit inherit trauma, right?
Mm.
And
Mm.
so there's this interesting thing where generationally people can inherit like trauma from their great grandparents,
Hmm.
which is pretty amazing. So like you think about a lot of people who went through the depression, like their grandchildren who didn't go through the depression still have this like hoarding tendency because they're afraid that they're not going to have food. They never
Yeah.
experienced not having food. It was their great grandparents, but that's kind of been passed along to them through DNA. That to me is fascinating. I love to read books about how the mind works, how the brain works, how
Mm.
DNA works. And this is just a fascinating um, book about how you can actually inherit trauma from like generations past, even though you've never experienced
Yeah.
it.
Wow.
What else is related to that and equally weird? If you train rats on a maze in New York, in a lab in New York, and you train them on a maze, and then you take a completely different set of rats and then run them through that maze after the fact in LA, they'll solve it faster. So what it comes down to is like, is there some weird different conscientious or conscious plane of stored information among species? And it really makes you think like,
Hmm.
what do we know about our three-dimensional world? You get like XYZ plus time, and then what else is out there? Like what connects us and draws us together? And my aunt actually studies the topic you talk about. She's a psychology professor.
Oh,
So
wow. I'd love to have a
yeah,
conversation with her, maybe get her on
yeah,
the
I'll link you up
podcast.
with my aunt
Oh
Vicky.
man, like psychology, like if I couldn't if I had to pick a different field to be in, it would be psychology. Like that just
Yeah,
fascinates me.
yeah, that's it's so wild. Like what we don't know. Back to what we have in study. We know more about Mars than we know about the human brain,
I
which
know.
is
So
kind of
wild.
funny. Well, I think that's a good. I think that links everything back together pretty nicely, and that's a good stopping point. But Kevin, man, really, thank you so much for joining us. Really fascinating, amazing to me that we've probably been in the same room together in Michigan, and we get to meet now digitally for the first time. It's pretty wild. It's
This
kind of
is
goofy
pretty
how small the
cool. This
world
is
is.
awesome, right? It is. It's funny, like how things end up connecting and coming back together. So
Yeah,
this is so cool. This is Thanks for having me on the show. We appreciate it.
really
Oh, thanks
appreciate
for
it. And
being
where can we
on.
find you? We can find you at ManoByte.com, and people can get you on LinkedIn. Anywhere else we want to?
Yeah, you can also go to my personal website, kjdean.com, and there I just muse about different processes and things. A lot of stuff about AI now. So, yeah, you can find me there as well.
Okay, cool. And you probably have a media kit there for speaking gigs and stuff like
I
that.
do. Yep.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Kevin. Really appreciate it. Enjoy your vacation in DC.
Our hurricane.
Hurricane.
Vacation.
The hurricane. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.